It's been a while since I did a live, and the reason that I'm doing this one is actually to announce a couple of upgrades that we've made to the group coaching program. And, we've been doing the group coaching for several months now. So, of course, we've learned so much in this process and got a lot of feedback from the different people who've gone through the course. So, right now, I have been in the process of just integrating all of that information and yeah, making some changes and upgrades. So when the course launches, which will be next Monday or this coming Monday, the 11th, with the calls will continue to take place on the Friday. But the course should be different and new and upgraded. And I just wanted to share a little bit about what those upgrades are. But to start with, I would like to just summarize uh, what the outline of the course is, what are the driving mechanisms of long COVID, and then we'll go on to talk about the upgrades. So, as many of you know, I'm sure our body is always trying to reach a sense of homeostasis. And, there are many things that block our body from reaching that state. So the process is kind of more about removing the barriers to um, recovery, as well as adding things, of course. So this table shows the driving mechanisms that we know of um, that drive long COVID. And also in some cases vaccine injury. So immune dysregulation is one. I'm sure everyone's heard of viral persistence. Basically, when the immune system just continues replicating the virus, and we continue to have symptoms of being ill. And this can sometimes come hand in hand with the reactivation of underlying pathogens such as EBV, herpes, any virus that's kind of underlying and dormant will come back out again when the immune system is compromised. So microbiome disruption or dysbiosis is another thing that's commonly experienced with people, and this can come in many forms, such as gas and bloating, constipation, acid reflux, maybe just an exacerbation of symptoms that we already had related to the microbiome. So autoimmunity is one of them. Sometimes people didn't realize they were kind of on the edge of having an autoimmune condition, or they already had a diagnosed autoimmune condition that was then exacerbated by getting COVID. Blood clotting and endothelial abnormalities. So microclotting is something that we now have a really great test for, that involves microscopy. So looking at the blood under a microscope and noticing for really small clots that you wouldn't necessarily see in basic labs, such as a D-dimer or a fibrinogen, for example. And then dysfunctional neurological signaling or dysautonomia, or maybe you know it as just nervous system dysregulation. This is a really common one that a lot of people have experienced before getting long COVID, and then again, it's exacerbated. And this can be the driving cause of things like tinnitus, brain fog, loss of smell and taste, even. So during the course, the group coaching program, we generally go over these different driving mechanisms and try to determine which ones are present for you, and then how to test for these different driving mechanisms, and then of course how to overcome them. Here's an example of a cytokine panel in the case of immune dysregulation. Here is um, an example of something that might repress the immune system. So, when we drink coffee, Coffee has a half-life of around 7 hours. So after 7 hours, around half the coffee is still present in our body. Um, so, you know, this can be repressing on the immune system, um, because basically it will disrupt our sleep. And as we know, sleep is really central to immune function. So this is just one example, of what we'll talk about in the course. Of course, we go into a lot of detail under each subject category and what drives each of these driving mechanisms, what's implicated in them, what foods, what supplements. But I'm just going to give this quick overview before we go into the other course upgrades. So supplements is another thing that we speak about in terms of helping to clear the spike protein or support these different driving mechanisms. We have quite an extensive supplement list, which I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with. Um, so this is an example of a GI stool map, which some people decide to do in the case of microbiome dysfunction. What we usually recommend and what we do as part of the program actually is just go over the basics of um, gut health and also mealtime hygiene and such things, because a lot of times people are doing very, very simple things like, for example, drinking a lot of water and diluting their stomach acid so that their stomach pH is the wrong pH to properly digest food. And then this has an impact all the way down in the digestive cascade and can be just easily fixed by just avoiding drinking water half an hour before a meal. So, of course, we want to encourage people to do these very simple and basic mealtime hygiene practices to see if their gut health just gets better on its own. But for a lot of people who, do the program and work on their gut health for many months and they still don't see improvements, it's useful to do something like this, which is a microbiome test. And it will show you the specific pathogens, the specific dysbiosis that you have, say, and which then in this sense you can be very targeted with the supplementation, because taking a broad spectrum probiotic, often they just contain things like lactobacillus or bifido. This way you can really know which specific strains are missing and target those, and see if that will have a better effect, as well as, of course, noticing if you have any kind of parasite or um, E. coli. There are a lot of different things that can disrupt the gut. So that is something that we recommend. This is, the basics of improving gut health, which is remove, replace, repair, inoculate, and rebalance. So we go into that in a little more detail. And then here is an example of, digestive bitters. So as I said, there are a lot of different things that we can do to stimulate and support the digestive system. And the GI stool map is kind of a last resort. And that's usually because it's quite expensive. And of course, we want to help support you to do all the things that you can do. And then resorting to something like this testing could be something that you do later on. Um, so yeah, this is an example of a digestive bitters that I really like that often helps with gas and indigestion and GERD, acid reflux, and these kind of things. So autoimmunity, we spoke a little bit about that. That comes up in the basic lab panel that we do. Um, Here is an example of a food list for people who have autoimmune conditions. It's called the Autoimmune Paleo Protocol, and it involves a certain elimination and reintroduction protocol that allows you to identify very specific food triggers that you might have. Black seed oil, this is an example of a supplement that's really great for people with autoimmune conditions. Here is the blood clotting slide. So, this is something important to determine because there are, again, very specific supplements that, and in the case of really severe blood clotting, we have a pharmaceutical protocol for that you can work with the medical team on. But nattokinase and serrapeptase are the main supplements that address that are in our protocol. So nervous system dysregulation, again, this one is probably the hardest to diagnose because there's no, of course, there's no lab for it. There's no blood work that you can do that will just tell you that you have nervous system dysregulation. It's more nuanced, but it's something that, you know, a lot of people, arguably almost everyone, experiences when they have long COVID, just because having long COVID and having a chronic condition for many years is in itself a stress on the nervous system. And many people already started in this kind of stressed state. And that was one of the reasons that left them predisposed for this. So here on the right is an example of a heart rate variability monitoring or testing graph, and it shows the different spaces between the heart beats. And this is one way in which we can get an idea of what state your nervous system is in by measuring our heart rate and determining you know how metronomic it is and how different the spaces are between each heartbeat, and that will help us determine if we're in a relaxed or a stressed state. This is some information about sympathetic versus parasympathetic, and also turmeric, of course, a great supplement that has a positive effect on neuroinflammation. So that is a quick. I went over that quite quickly because that is an outline of what the course generally does. But what I've noticed, in the last months of doing the course is that we have a lot of questions specifically on on the question of the supplement protocol, the prescription protocol. Um, and this is something that a lot of people get stuck and confused around. So I've really built the course out more this time to focus on the kinds of questions that many people ask. So one thing is that the supplement protocol is very extensive, and this means that it can be quite expensive. And it also means that a lot of people's digestive system gets disrupted just by default of having to be on so many supplements and take, handfuls of pills every day. Because, of course, the best way to get nutrients is through food. And our stomach will be affected by things like the vegetable cellulose capsules that the pills, the nutrients come in, the additives, the anti-caking agents, the fillers, the magnesium stearate, silicon dioxide, all of these ingredients in supplements that are used that for different, basically methods of preserving them, can be disruptive on the gut health, especially if we're taking so many. So a lot of people have asked questions about how to minimize the number of supplements that they're taking. Um, and of course, one way is trying to get these through food. So, as an example, vitamin D is really prevalent in fatty fish. So, here you can get, um, here lists basically the amount of vitamin D you can get from something like salmon. Um, and as it shows here, wild caught salmon gives you about double the amount of vitamin D as farmed salmon. So we want to get really specific on what kind of foods and how much can give you the nutrients that you need, and also what quality, right? Because of course the difference between wild and farm salmon is really big in terms of, not just in terms of the nutrients, but also in terms of the toxins, antibiotics. Um, Actually, the omega-3 to omega-6 ratio will be different in wild caught to farm salmon. Um, so we'll also give information about how and where to actually source these foods, right? Because it's one thing saying, okay, choose wild caught, choose grass fed, choose this. But then where do you find these things? Is there a way to make it more accessible, such as through a CSA program, a community supported agriculture subscription that you can sign up for? The CSA network in the US is really amazing, and you can go online and develop a relationship with local farmers and have them supply much of your food, which is amazing. So it's really going through every single step of this process. It's not just saying, okay, you're going to need this much vitamin D. That's it. There's the question of how can I get it? Where can I get it from? Do I have to get all of it from supplements? So these are the kind of things that I've gone into a lot more detail in. So here is an app called DMinder, and this app is really interesting because it basically records, well, it tells you the amount of vitamin D that you get from the sun, depending on your location and depending on the time of day that you go outside. So, and you can also enter data such as your age, your skin tone, your weight. All of these things will affect how much vitamin D you get from the sun. Um, so this is a great resource if you want to try to get vitamin D from going outside as opposed to just supplementing. So, when we see something like, okay, in the supplement list, we recommend this amount of vitamin D. You don't have to just default to using a supplement. You can also consume the wild caught salmon. You can also go outside and use this app to track how much vitamin D you're going to get just from the sun and exposing yourself to the sun in the morning, which also has great benefits for circadian rhythm and other things. And then maybe you'll still need to supplement a little bit, but it won't be as much as it would be if you didn't do these other things. And that is great for our budget, and also just good for not over supplementing and distressing the gut health with an excessive amount of supplements. So, this is another example, vitamin D and K2. So, another important thing when we talk about when it comes to supplementation is what supplements should be taken together or separate. So, vitamin D ensures that calcium absorbed easily, and K2 actually integrates the calcium into the bones. Um, and vitamin D and K2 also work together to promote arterial flow and flexibility. So there are a lot of supplements that need to be taken together and need to be taken apart. And it's important to know that if you want to maximize bioavailability. And that's also, especially important when we have to take so many, which is in the case of the supplement protocol. So recipes, another thing that a lot of people have asked about, they've said, okay, great, I'm going to get these nutrients from this food, but how do I make this dish? Or how do I make this thing taste good? Or how do I make it in 30 minutes as opposed to hours? So I'm going to share a lot of recipes with you to find ways in which the accessible ways to basically make these foods. Um, so again, going back to contraindications, another important thing to bear in mind is the supplements contraindications or interactions with other pharmaceutical drugs that you might be taking. So not only do nutrients interact with other nutrients and block or facilitate absorption, but pharmaceutical drugs also can do the same. So it's important to know for each nutrient, if you are on any pharmaceutical protocol, which nutrient will be interfered with by taking that supplement with it. And again, okay, so foods that might affect the absorption. In the case of zinc, for example, any kind of phytates, which are basically a kind of anti-nutrient that are present, especially in cereal grains like corn, rice, wheat. They all contain phytates, which basically block the absorption of zinc. Actually, they block the absorption of a lot of minerals, not only zinc. Um, but obviously, that's important if you want to supplement with zinc. So One way in which you can actually reduce the the phytate content in something like a grain is by soaking and sprouting. So, for example, soaking rice, soaking oats overnight, any kind of grain can be soaked overnight with something like apple cider vinegar or lemon juice, and that will greatly reduce the content in these foods. And then you go ahead and cook it in the normal way. And that's one way in which you can, you know, basically reduce the phytates. And that's a good thing to do just in general, because as I said, that phytates block all kinds of mineral absorptions. It's not just zinc. And they also just generally inhibit digestion. So anytime we soak and we have time to soak or sprout a food, it will help the bioavailability of that food in general. So that's also another important factor to um, basically finding ways to get the most out of the supplements um, protocol. So I think that is it. I went over the beginning part quite quickly. If anyone has any questions in regards to what the course is actually about, um, I'm more speak I'm more speaking on the upgrades that are going to be made, but many of you might actually have more questions about the course in general. So um, I'm just going to open up the question list. One second. Okay. So, okay. Um, so questions about the logistics of the course in general. Um, the course launches on Monday, the 11th, so next Monday, and the calls will take place on Friday at 12 midday noon EST time. The group coaching calls usually last around an hour, and everyone has a chance to ask questions bio individually. And then I do a follow up email to the group and also to individuals who ask specific questions during the week. And yeah, I think that the other people in the group actually are really valuable in offering support, whether that's emotional support, but also just practical things like, oh, I ordered this sauna wrap. In our last group coaching program, um, there was someone who ordered an infrared sauna wrap, and it was discounted at a specific place, and it was a specific low EMF sauna wrap. And she shared this information in the group, and then many other people in the group also purchased the same infrared sauna wrap, and they used it, and had a lot of good benefits from doing so. So everyone in the group is going through similar kinds of issues. So it's a great resource to be able to bounce ideas around from each other and share information. Um, Another question is also about the having access to the medical team. So the medical team do facilitate any kind of labs that you want to order. So that can be our basic lab panel, or it can be these more specific functional medicine labs, such as the GI stool map, which I shared in the presentation. They can go ahead and order that, and they will also analyze it for you. And you'll have a parallel dialogue with them that's alongside the group coaching program. And of course, those things are cross pollinated, and anything that they tell you, we can further enrich during the group coaching program. But yeah, you'll have access to them, and someone from the medical team will be on the call in the second week just to speak with you about what kind of labs that you can do and how to order them and such things. Um, and I think that is it for questions. Um, Thank you very much for listening. And if you would like to scan this QR code here in the corner, you can find more information about the group coaching in general. And anyone who has further questions can also reach out to me via email, or also book a free discovery call. There is still space to do that over the weekend and also next week if you want to talk about, you know, what exactly more the course is about, or if you have any specific questions. So, thank you very much for listening, and hope to see some of you on the program. Goodbye.